Yo, boys and girls, bitches, hoes, men, women, children, whoever you are, everyone's welcome here to my Peter here, aka Peter Freako 10, baby. Bring you guys an episode of Video Game Time, where the good games are always reviewed. Okay, back into our video game review. Alright, and I know I'm late to the party with this game, but I figured with the sequel having the time this summer that I'm going to be doing a Let's Play for, I figured now was a perfect time to play this game. Because the game that I'm talking about, for those wondering before we jump into the review, is none other than Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver, which I will be starting this summer along with a good friend of mine. Now, what a lot of people may not realize about that game is that it is in fact a sequel to another game. And originally I was going to skip this one because Soul Reaver, from what I've seen, is in a genre that I'm more familiar with and it's easier for me to pick up and play. And I was tempted to avoid this one and wait to play the next one, being that at the time this really wasn't a genre that I was patient with, and I was just like, I don't need to play it as I'm not. But the more I read into it and realized how the story in this game plays into the next one, I figured I'd challenge myself and explore this genre, which you guys have seen I've been doing recently, because not only with this game, I've also been doing it with Diablo, with a good friend of mine, Power Boss. And even on its own, reading into it a bit more, I thought this game sounded really cool. I thought it had a lot riding on it, and even with it being set up in a part of the genre I wasn't really used to, I thought it would make for a fun time to really familiarize myself with the world that this game created leading into Soul Reaver. But before we reveal what that game is, let me ask you something. What do you get when you take the top-down style of an old-school Zelda and mix vampires in it? Well, the answer, you get Blood Omen, Legacy of Kain. Hell yes. How does it all come together, though? Well, grab your swords, grab your spells that will turn you into whatever form or being you want, get a cup of blood or a good bottle of blood, and let's talk Blood Omen. Now, Blood Omen Legacy of Kain, this was a game made in the year 1996, and this was developed by Silicon Knights, who before this developed games like Cyber Empire, The Horde for Sega Saturn, Fantasy Empires, and Dark Legion. But this game was actually released for the PlayStation, and then a year later it came out for the PC, which is what I played it on, if you guys saw the Let's Play. Now, development of this game, the idea behind getting this game made actually came about after the success of Silicon Knights' last game, Dark Legions. The team were deciding on where they should go next with their next game, and the team got a meeting going with Crystal Dynamics producer Lyle Hall and writer Ken Mullock. They started going through ideas of what they wanted to do, and they had pitched the idea of their game to Human, which ended up being rejected, as they wanted to do something more akin to the realm of a fantasy game. They did agree on one thing, though, that the game should be big, as they wanted a game that they felt would surpass the industry expectations from a 1996 standard. Around this time, the team were sent the idea of doing a game based around the Pillars of Nosgoth, a story that was inspired by 4 places. Number 1, the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan. 2, the movie The Unforgiven with Clint Eastwood. 3, the Necroscope series. And 4, the Pillars of Earth, along with various Shakespearean plays. The team on both sides agreed to do this project as they felt it was the type of fantasy they were looking to work with. They originally intended to develop the game for the 3DO and the Sega Saturn, but the team instead decided to make it for the PlayStation as the system was just announced and they thought they could make better use of the technology. They got to work developing the game, and with the idea of making it, they wanted to do something in the vein of a Legend of Zelda top-down 2D side-scroller with an M for Mature rating. They also drew influence from their own work to Human, a game in development that they were working on, incorporating a weapon that was going to be used in the main game. and put into this one, that of course being the Soul Reaver sword. Development extended from its original time, which led to an increase in developers in the office. Staff from Canada were brought into the US to work on the game. During all this time, the team started promoting the game at E3 in both 1995 and 1996 with a targeted release of Halloween 96, with the PC version getting a release a year later. The game was unleashed on Halloween 96, and it was a hit for the company, selling over 320,000 units, which may not seem like much, but it was still a success for both Crystal Dynamics and Silicon Knights. On the reception side, the game also received positive reviews from critics. While there is no game ranking or Metacritic score for the game, on game rankings, the game carries, on the PlayStation side, an 83.25%. It's unknown what the PC version ranks at, but critics in general praise the game for its story, the character of Kain, which also tied into Simon Templeman's performance, who earned a great number of praise, the game's sound, graphics, cutscenes, and gameplay. However, some aspects of the game were criticized, in particular the PS1 version, which the load times were a big complaint, which the PC version actually fixes. The game's control scheme, and at times feeling sluggish in some areas to some of the critics. Nevertheless, the game scored a big win for the company of Silicon Knights and Crystal Dynamics, who greenlit a sequel, that of course being Soul Reaver. It was originally set for a release on Halloween 98, but ended up being delayed. Why? Well, you may think it's to polish the game or get some new features added in. No, it's because they were going for a lawsuit. Time to go to video game court! What was going on? You see, Silicon Knights had planned to set up for a Legacy of Kain sequel, and it was to be more like the original. What Silicon Knights claims is that Crystal Dynamics had a contract going with them for them to publish the game, while Silicon Knights held the rights for the series. Dennis Dyack claims Crystal Dynamics broke their side of the agreement, feeling that they were in bad financial stability around the time, and claimed they went behind their backs for Kain 2 and did something completely different, allegedly claiming that Soul Reaver was supposed to be a concept for another game and that Crystal Dynamics was taking the series from them, feeling that they created it in the first place, and that at the time, another game called Shifter was supposed to be another game set in a post-apocalyptic world, ended up being worked into a sequel to Blood Omen, therefore getting Soul Reaver. It's all a he said, she said situation, but at times I do have to take Crystal Dynamics' side in this situation, because some of Dennis Dyack's and Silicon Knights' anger stem from the fact that it isn't theirs, and they chose to go with a more Ocarina of Time approach, which to me sounds like they wanted to evolve the series beyond its 2D top-down original Zelda look into what it is with Soul Reaver, which to me just comes across as ungrateful. And it isn't like he isn't getting credit for it, because he is. The articles mentioned this started from Blood Omen, and Silicon Knights was one of the people who did it. And some of the interviews, he just comes off as spoiled and bratty, because he doesn't like the directions the series is going. And I'm like, Dennis, they're evolving the series, much in the same way Nintendo did with Zelda when they did Ocarina of Time. You have to try different things with your series if you want them to survive. And even if it fails, you could still go back to the old style. Some people don't like Castlevania 64. They tried that, but it didn't go well. So they may as well go back to the old style. But these are the same people complain about wanting to evolve their series. They want them to stay afloat and want them to try something different. But when something is different, they argue it's too different. It's like, screw off. And at times his actions make it hard for me to take his side in this situation. That's me, though. And that's all for this edition of Video Game Court. Because we're not here for that. We're here for my opinion on Blood Omen. Now, as I said, despite it being a part of a genre that I'm not used to playing on this channel, I figured why not see what it has to offer. And with this being my first time, what did I think of it? I like this game. And even with Soul Reaver looking like it's taking a different approach, and with me getting used to this genre and me liking where Soul Reaver is taking the series, I thought this was a solid game and a really cool one with that. Now, granted, it does have its flaws, and some of the flaws that I do mention may come across from the fact that I am new at this genre and these types of RPGs. But it's one of those games where learning its basics and mechanics and getting into the experience can create a rewarding game. It's just one of those games also that I will mention later, but the best way for me to describe it is you really have to be in the right mood to play it. I'll explain why later though. But anyway, getting into the plot of this game, the plot is basically it takes place in the fictional world of Nosgoth where humans and vampires coexist, and we meet this guy named Kain, voiced by Simon Templeman, an arrogant nobleman who one night ends up being killed. However, he wakes up in the afterlife where he's found by Mortanius, voiced by Tony J, who gives him a chance to come back from the dead at the cost of him being brought back as a vampire, where he decides to use this new ability to find those who killed him, all the while being led by this oracle named Ariel, voiced by Anna Gunn, to take out the gods associated with the 9 pillars of Nosgoth, all the while trying to find a cure to turn him back to human. Will Kain be able to destroy the pillars and kill those associated with his death? Or will he get some holy water thrown in his face and be melted into a pool of vampire guts? Kicking things off, where Blood Omen truly delivers is in the story department. Because when you hear that it's another vampire game, you think, oh god, being that this was a year or two before Blade, so vampires were still being seen in the sort of Anne Rice Interview with a Vampire light around them. Despite having movies like From Dusk Till Dawn and Vampire in Brooklyn, the latter of which, while being silly with Eddie Murphy, even though there's reports of him wanting a more serious film, it still tried to keep the serious light around vampires. But even with those two, this kind of goes back to the feel of Nosferatu with elements of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It has that operatic, very poetic, and gothic feel that both those films have, and you can even see the Shakespearean side that they wanted to go with for this game. So you get a sense of a very straight-faced story. Even with Vampire in Brooklyn and From Dusk Till Dawn, while serious, there was a sense of a tongue-in-cheek vibe to them. Not dissing those movies. Those movies are great. But I appreciate the direction and tone they took with the story and playing it straight-faced, along with the fact that I also feel that the lore is very interesting in how it's presented and written. It really has this sense of beauty and poeticism to it in the way it's presented that is really beyond any other game I've seen from around this time, with a good chunk of the game being from Kain's POV as he describes the sight of something in particular in the way of Shakespearean sort of way, which also kind of hints to his arrogance and vicious personality. Kain is definitely not a role model. He's not someone to look up to. He's a vicious, unsympathetic character with no boundaries, with only vengeance on his mind. But due to his poetic side and how he views the world around him, it makes it hard not to like him due to how he uses those words in such a hypnotizing way that it's hard not to want him to see him succeed. And with that, I also feel it makes his journey a lot more rewarding. And it also kind of makes you, the player, feel badass in a way. Like, these are things that you want to feel when you play a video game, is like a badass and somebody whose morality is a bit flawed. And I like that they went with that with Kain. With that, I also like the lore they created with Nosgoth and how vampires exist in this world. I thought it was an interesting way to go about it, and how their existence ties into the pillars of Nosgoth, and each god represents that pillar. The only thing that I will say about the story is that at times it does feel like it moves a little bit too fast, because the story introduces a lot of characters who I won't spoil. And because of how fast the story moves, it doesn't feel like the game allows you to have enough time to sink in who these characters are. And there's some points that I had a hard time distinguishing one from the other due to how fast each one is introduced and how underdeveloped some of them seem. The most developed, I think, are Kain, Vorador, Mortanius, and even Ariel, as those guys have and woman have the most time dedicated to them. Everyone else just doesn't feel like they have much to them. And the game at times spends too much time telling you who they are as opposed to showing you. So the world doesn't feel like it's as big as it could be because it doesn't feel like the characters have any sort of character outside of the ones I mentioned. And because they're not showing you what they're doing, it really just makes the world feel condensed. That being said, the story for what it does offer is well done, and what they do set up here is something that I hope gets explored more in Soul Reaver. Now, on a technical side, and starting with the graphics, I think this is a solid looking game. The world of Nosgoth is really creative. Look at something akin to the production design of Bram Stoker's Dracula. The world itself feels like it has a great sense of variety with each area you visit. There's a great gothic outlook to each of the areas you come across. Each area has its own sort of feel to it. There's even some cool weather patterns, like one area may be snowing, there's rain. There's even a day to night cycle, which is amazing that they got it in a game of this caliber on the PS1 in 1996. Those little things really contribute to the gothic mood. And even various other things, like when you're walking through the area, some places may have dead bodies hanging off the walls and they'll have their intestines ripped out. People will be hanging off the wall alive, screaming for help. There's some people with sticks up their ass and through them, something akin to Cannibal Holocaust. And there's also secret passages to find, some power ups, and some stuff that will help you in the long run. So, pretty much, you'll have to really investigate the area. And there will be some traps that you will have to dodge. So, you'll spend a lot of time dodging those as you go through the game. So you'll find yourself staying longer in each area than anticipated, taking in the gothic mood and atmosphere of each area. And I like that creativity, which, yes, you could say was done before in some of Edgar Allan Poe's work or any Dracula, or even the dungeon idea does seem a bit borrowed from the old Zelda games. But how the game takes these ideas and presents them is done in a way that makes it stand on its own, and it has fun with the idea. Especially since, unlike Zelda, this is a very violent game. It's bloody and definitely not one you want kids to play. The animation on the blood in those areas looks cool. I especially like when he's sucking in the blood out of people, and you'll see it come out like this, sort of telepathically coming to him instead of him sinking his teeth into people. And when he's done, you'll hear him making those slurping sounds. I like that animation. And along with that, the enemies themselves look really cool. There's a great variety to them. You won't be fighting the same guy over and over again, but there will be a wide assortment of enemies, all of which look really cool and definitely contribute to the threatening atmosphere that they were going for. And the cutscenes themselves look fine. The animations look fine for what they were going for. However, there's some areas where the character models do come across a bit inconsistent to me. Like, the look of the vampires, I will say, they look great in those moments. There's some great designs in the faces and how they're animated and the lip sync in there. They look great. However, I find the look of the humans an entirely different story. Now, it's not like they're all out terrible, but I feel there's some moments when they do look a bit unfinished, because there's some moments when they do get up close and they do look a bit plasticky or mannequin-like in those moments. And I really wish they directed those scenes in a way that hid those aspects of the graphics, because it really sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of the graphics, especially when you see them and they come across with these big lifeless eyes that really kind of take me out of the game. But besides that, graphically, I think it's a good looking game. Even playing it on PC, it runs really well, solid frame rate, didn't come across any crashes or glitches. Plus, the PC version fixes the load time issue of the PlayStation version, so bear that in mind if you're deciding on what version to play. Aside from that, the sound is also great. Even with the one that I mentioned earlier of him sucking the blood, that sounds very cool. But along with that is the great cast they got here, starting with Simon Templeman, who some may know as the Angel of Death on the TV show Charm. He is fantastic. He gives a great selfish and bullish side to Kain that really makes you hate him at the same time love him, especially with how Simon's personality mixes with the character, from his angry cry of Victus to the monologues he gives as he gives a description of the particular area. Simon really makes Kain stand out in a way that I can't imagine any actor doing. Tony J, Frollo from Hunchback of Notre Dame, who plays two characters in this, and in both sides, he does a great job. Starting with Mortanius, the main vampire who brings back Kain from the dead, and another one as one of the bosses called the Dark Entity. I do think he does do better as Mortanius, as that character has more time on screen, as I mentioned earlier, so he has more to work with as opposed to the other guy he plays. But either way, he does really well. His really just gruff, well, not gruff, but very... I can't think of a way to describe Tony J's voice. His very commanding just presence with his voice, and his very just operatic, and just the way he talks really draws you in. Same way he did with Frollo. So Tony J is great. Other actors, you got Anna Gunn from Enemy of the State as the Angel or the Oracle Ariel, who kind of serves as Kane's guide. She does well for what she has to do. Richard Doyle as this character named Mobius, who tries to manipulate Kain, and Neil Ross even has a role. And they all do great for what they are given. Along with the sound, the score is also great. Great job by Stephen Heffen. Really accompanies the atmosphere and the locations that the team were going for, and really just gives the game the mood that I really don't think any other composer would understand what to do and how to deliver that mood. Especially when you're walking. Like that score when you're walking, and that whole, and just how the world itself really ties into you and the atmosphere, and just how you feel lost, but at the same time you feel like there's something around the corner waiting to attack you, despite being this powerful creature of the night. So overall, while held back at some areas and could use a bit more polish, especially on some of the character models, there's a lot more good than bad for that aspect to be forgiven. But of course, the one aspect that needs to be talked about is, of course, the gameplay. Now, the gameplay plays a lot like the old Zelda games, more akin to Zelda 2 Link to the Past. It's played from a top-down 2D perspective, and you advance through the game's environments, taking down various enemies at your disposal. It plays with some Metroidvania elements where you'll come to a particular area and you'll need a particular item or spell to progress, which this game does and doesn't do well. On the surface, I like the idea of the game encouraging you to explore and find the stuff you need to advance the game. But in this game, it can be aggravating because there's some points the game doesn't even want to throw you a bone or drop a subtle hint of what you need. Which I'm not asking for the game to hold your hand, but there's some points when you'll need a spell unaware of its existence in the game. On top of that, the places you explore to find the spells, you wouldn't think you need to explore or wouldn't think it exists because the top-down camera keeps it at a height that's too hard to see anything. And the navigation can be a real hassle because you can only look at the map on the sub-screen. So you have to keep flipping back and forth between the menu and the game, and you can't pinpoint where to go. And it really kills the pacing. And the sub-screen also serves as your inventory screen, whether or not you want to switch your weapons or spells. The positive side of that, though, is that there is a quick select, and I do appreciate that, especially for your magic. But if you have to change your armor and or weapons, you have to go into the menu and do that. Aside from that, what I will say is that in terms of controls, the game controls really well. Granted, you do have to get used to the fact that all your buttons are only mapped to a keyboard and there's no mouse support. Thankfully, though, you can change the button layout in the menu, so there is that. But it controls well for the most part. The fighting system, for the most part, is solid. Granted, I did find some sketchy collision detection issues when you do fight a couple of them. Or when using the spell, I had this one moment when I was trying to get a shot, a possession spell, because I was on the second floor right here. There's a floor below me, like right here. And there's a guy across, like right here. And there's this one guy in the middle. And I was trying to get a shot at the guy, like at the guy right here. And I shoot the possession spell. The guy down here gets in the middle, right here, and he gets hit by it. And this guy is supposed to be on the first floor right here. So it makes no sense. And it just got so annoying and it made no sense. And I've encountered that more than one time while playing this game. But the fighting system can be cool, especially with the array of weapons that you do get. Like you get a regular sword, you get these 2 hatchets that will help you destroy trees and create a path for you. There's a spiked mace, and of course the Soul Reaver, the main attraction of the game, which is the sword that will destroy anything in your path. Sometimes in one damn hit. I shit you not. And they're all really cool. They're all fun to use. Each one can take down an enemy in such a really cool way, despite the hitboxes being a bit annoying because you have to time them perfectly to strike, so that could take some getting used to, especially if you're more akin to someone who likes the Ocarina of Time game. But overall, it gets the job done. There are other stuff to collect too as you go through the game. Like you can get this other armor that will protect you against other enemy types and their spells. There's also various spells to get, like one that shoots lightning, one that can transform you into a werewolf to get to places you can't get to. You can get this shield spell that will deflect enemy spells. There's a couple where you can possess a person and get to areas you couldn't get to as Kain. There's many more, but those are the basic spells. And those are really cool to use. None of them are overpowered. They all feel balanced, and you'll want to try them all to see what they all offer. Of course, though, there's the boss battles, which are fine. They're nothing groundbreaking in terms of boss battles, because all you do is run up to them and whack them and avoid their attacks. Nothing really much to run home about. Definitely nothing on, say, Turok 2 or even, I think, Ocarina of Time's boss battles. Nothing really much to say. And there are upgrades to find. There's some vials that will give you more magic or health. And there's some other stuff like hearts to find that will give you extra lives. There's really nothing much to collect. It's nothing to the extent of Ocarina of Time. But it's fine for what they were going for around the time. And it's enough to keep you playing. But yeah, it may sound like I'm harsher on this game than I intended, but I don't intend to be. But it's one of those games that I really, as I said, I have to be in the right mood to play it. That's why I took so long to beat this game. And there's 2 reasons why. The first one being the save system, because this game does not operate on an autosave system. Instead, it's one of those games that you have to manually save. And you cannot open up the menu and save it right there. No. Even though that's what I'm glad about Soul Reaver doing, so that's why I'm happy about that they actually listen. But in this game, you have to advance through the area till you get to a particular area and find like these monuments that you save at. And the time it takes you to get there is so goddamn annoying and so long. And sometimes it drags on and on to a point that it drains you. And there's no checkpoints. So you really have to put a lot of time and effort into that. But I feel checkpoints would have made that a bit better. Granted, you can have multiple save slots, which works for me, especially when I film these videos. In case something screws up, I can go back and film that. But it can get annoying having to walk all the way there. Granted, you can teleport there through the bat thing, but you have to unlock the teleporter station that will take you there. So that can get tedious. And another thing I do not like about the game is the difficulty. Oh boy. This game is hard as hell. I go as far to say this is one of the hardest damn games I've ever played. And I'll admit, had I not wanted to review this game, I probably would have quit it. That's how hard it is. And it can be really, really unbalanced with some of the enemies who will charge right at you and take a good chunk of health out of you. Combine that with the annoying hitboxes, especially in the final battle, which is a chore to finish, and you will rage like you never raged before. I literally almost broke this keyboard playing it. That's how difficult it was. Those two things really emphasized how much I had to be in the right mood to play this game and how I was just really ready to rage quit it. But besides that, bottom line, while not my type of game and definitely held back at some areas, Blood Omen Legacy of Kain should be played to at least experience the start of the series. And for a first game, it's a solid start. Whether or not you'll enjoy it depends on your preference when it comes to these sort of games and whether or not you like games like Diablo or Warcraft. You'll have fun with this game. However, if you don't like those types of games or more into, say, Ocarina of Time, I highly recommend skipping this and waiting for Soul Reaver. But when it comes down to it, for me as a game, I give it a 7.9 out of 10. It was going to get an 8, but the more I thought about it and at the final boss battle, I can't give it more than a 7.8, falling short of the seal of approval. It's not a bad game, don't get me wrong, but I think that there are some areas where it could be better. But with that said, for the first game, definitely excited to see what Soul Reaver brings to the table. But that is my review for Legacy of Kain Blood Omen. And next time I will have my review done of Payback, and then I'm going to do my Jawbreaker review. And I'll have a few other things coming down the pipeline that I cannot wait to talk about. And I will tonight start Fighting Force, as I've been wanting to start this game for a while. Just got to get the sound on my laptop to come through so I can get the Elgato HD60, as I've been dying to start this. I just picked it up for Easter. But for right now, I will see you guys later. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think of Blood Omen Legacy of Kain. Do you guys like the game? Do you like Soul Reaver more based on what I've seen? It does look like an improved game. It's all up to you guys. But again, rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.